Hello and welcome to the Brutal Iron Gym podcast, where our goal is to cut through the BS and deliver the brutal truth about topics related to health and happiness. Today's podcast number 1437. The topic is training and the title is Programming for Greatest Muscle Growth. So real quick, if you do hear anything in the background, I am outside of a facility today, so there are going to be some extra noises, but I hope everybody will be able to hear me, so thank you for your patience. So today's topic came from, I'm actually outside of a gym where I helped a trainer. We're doing programming together. Basically, I'm helping him. He owns his gym, and I'm helping him write programming templates that he and his trainers can use to kind of modify for each individual client, but still have consistency in kind of the quality of programming that his facility is offering. So really fun stuff. I love these kind of things. And we just got done. We were talking about a program if the main focus is greatest amount of muscle growth. So he has some clients that they want to come in, they want to be lean, yes, they want to be strong, sure, but they really just want to be freaking jacked. So he's like, what do I got to do in my programming to ensure that I get people as big as possible? And he wants to eventually kind of train more and more people for competitions instead of competitions. So I have helped people earn pro cards in drug tested and non-tested organizations. So I do know that stuff, and we've been talking about him wanting to get to that level of kind of coaching and stuff. So I think I just said the word stuff like 7 times. Sorry about that. Nutrition-wise, what you need to do is yesterday's podcast. So in yesterday's podcast, 1436, we talked about nutrition for kind of peak aesthetics. So that is the nutritional aspect that you or your client would need to follow if you want to maximize muscle growth. The reason why is you can train, all you want, but muscle is made of protein. If you want new muscle, you have to have new protein. You have to have protein available within your food. But you also have to have enough carbs and fats, which kind of contribute to total calories, to provide the energy that you need to make those adaptations. So if you want to build muscle, yes, you do need to train. But what is the muscle going to be built with? The training produces kind of the need for bigger muscles. How do you actually make bigger muscles? Is how you eat. So everything that I'm about to say in the podcast means nothing, and it will get you nothing if you aren't accounting for what you would need to do nutritionally. So make sure you listen to yesterday's podcast to 100% know that your nutrition will support the training that you're about to try to do if you listen and kind of implement some of the aspects in today's podcast. So what we're going to cover, kind of a couple of areas that he and I talked about, was frequency. How often do people need to train? He has some client, all of his clients basically have different training frequencies. So he's like, do I need to tell everybody they have to train X number of times a week, or what do we do with it? We also talked about sets, like how many sets of work should be in a workout. Exercise selection, should he do isolation? Should he not do isolation? Should he do big compounds? Should he not do big compounds? And then we also just kind of talked about some other components, but the one I want to mention as well is progressive overload, so progression of stimulus. So if we look at this, frequency. One of the fun things about frequency is how often you train a muscle group per week. It can have a wide variety. Can you get away with great growth training only once a week per muscle group? Sure. Can you train each muscle group 4 times a week or 5 times a week? Absolutely. You can. There are some of those answers that are not smart, but studies have shown, and I've seen it, firsthand with clients, that people can get jacked if they're training body parts once a week, twice a week, 3 times a week, 4 times a week. But there are complications when you get to the extreme ends. So if you're training a body part once a week, you have to beat the living hell out of it. Because if you're not training it again for 7 days, you have to create so much damn damage that it takes you 5, 6, 7 days to fully recover and be ready to go again. Because if you train it on day 1, but then it recovers in 2 days, and by day 4 it's ready to go. However, you don't train it on day 4, you don't train on day 5, you don't train on day 6, you don't train on day 7. You just sat around for 4 days when the muscle could have had another stimulus. So training only 1 time a week, it's suboptimal if you don't create enough damage to last a week. If you do try to create enough damage to last a week, the work has to be really freaking long, which is not good for most people's schedules. And you have to absolutely bury the body in order to get those muscles that damaged. And you're going to annihilate a lot of the joints. You're going to wear out your CNS. There's going to be a lot of issues that come with that. And you might see that with like really disrupted sleep patterns. That's one way to know your CNS is all jacked up. Also, your knee will be annoyed, or your shoulder will be annoyed, or your elbow will be annoyed, or something in your wrist is really funky after a couple weeks. So the joints just aren't recovering. So once a week, can it be done? Yes. Is it optimal? No, definitely not. Now, 4 times a week, let's say, like about that. If more is better, 4 times a week, I'll just train it, full body, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. And it's like, okay, you could, but that also raises a bunch of injury concerns, because if you're loading those joints every single day, you're going to run into a lot of just wear and tear. And you're not giving enough time in between the stimulus. 24 hours is not enough time to fully heal like connective tissue stress. So you're going to run into, again, kind of joint problems. And if you're trying to train, each body part 4 times a week, it means you're training almost your whole freaking body every single workout, which is going to take forever as well. So that's going to be a really long workout as well. So 2 to 3 times a week is usually best. Training a muscle group 2 to 3 times a week. 2 is kind of what I tend to lean towards. With every once in a while, I might throw in a specific body part the client wants to really focus on and add it a third time of the week. So maybe they do shoulders, on their 2, say they have 2 upper body days, 2 lower body days. On the upper body days, they do, shoulders both days, and then maybe we do a run the rack of shoulders on the start of one of their leg days. Something like that. But the idea is that you have all body parts covered twice a week, with maybe an occasional super emphasis on one muscle group where you add it a third time of the week. So what you can do there is just figure out your schedule. How many days a week can you train? Then distribute all the body parts you want to address amongst that many days, and make sure that each body part gets addressed twice a week. And make sure that the body parts you need the most are addressed first in the week, so you have the most energy and you can kind of attack them when you're fresh. Now, we're going to get into a lot more complexity, and I'm going to try not to get too in-depth. So today's podcast is going to be kind of an intro to this. Maybe in the future I'll do some kind of crazy in-depth one. But that's frequency. If we look at sets, how much work should you do? In general, research has shown, blah, 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 that about 10 to 20 hard sets per week per body part. So if I'm training, say chest twice a week, I need between 5 to 10 hard sets per workout. Now, what is a hard set? That's a great question. So it's you taking the muscle group, you're taking the exercise to failure, good form failure, or maybe 1-2 reps short of that. So reps in reserve is abbreviated RIR, but that's something I use with clients when I need to for these reasons. But I might have them do an exercise for, say a set of 8 to 10 reps with 1 to 2 RIR. What this means is they're going to pick a weight that they can do for 8 to 10 reps, but they're going to stop when they have about 1 or 2 more reps that they probably could do. So maybe they do 10 reps, and they could have gotten 11th, maybe a 12th, but definitely not a 13th. That's going to be that stopping at 1 to 2 RIR. So whether you stop at true good form failure, or you stop 1 to 2 reps in reserve, reps short of good form failure, it kind of depends on how many sets you're doing within a workout per muscle group. So more sets of the same muscle group within a workout, you don't need as much intensity per set. So 1 to 2 RIR is great. But if you only have 1 or 2 max effort sets for a body part in a workout, then you want to go to good form failure. So it kind of depends on the set count per muscle group within that individual workout. So throughout the whole week, you want to have 10 to 20 hard sets per body part. But whether you take it to good form failure or 1 to 2 reps of short of good form failure kind of depends on how many sets you do within a single workout. If I'm doing few sets per muscle group, then I want to push them harder. If I'm doing more sets per muscle group, I want to kind of push them a little less, maybe 1 to 2 reps short of failure. So that is kind of the set count per week, and then how to manage your intensity per set within each individual workout. The next thing you want to look at is exercise selection. So, do you pick all isolation movements? Do you pick only compound movements? What in the hell did I just say? Isolation movement is where you want to single out a singular muscle. Think of bicep curls. I'm trying to use no other muscle than just bicep curls. Think of chest flies. I'm trying to use only my chest muscles. I don't want my front shoulder or my triceps to get involved. So an isolation movement is you're trying to isolate a singular muscle. A compound movement means you're having multiple muscles involved. So a chest press involves my chest, my front shoulder, and my tricep. It involves like core stability and a bunch of other muscles, but the muscles that are contracting to lift the load is your chest, front shoulder, and tricep. So that's a compound movement. You're using multiple muscles, like multiple joints. So whether you pick isolation or compound movements, it's an individual factor. I tend to base that based on strength levels, frequency of their workouts, and just their general recovery ability. So the stronger somebody is, the less compound movements they need. If they do too many compound movements, they're just going to cause a lot of joint stress. So they need more isolations. The weaker somebody is, they actually need more compound movements because they're not strong enough to use a significant amount of weight on their isolation exercises. So the stronger you are, the more isolations you should do. The weaker you are, the more compound movements you should do. The more frequent you train, the more isolations you should have because it's less stress on the joint. The less frequent you train, the more compound movements you should have because you have more recovery for the joints between your workouts. So all of that is kind of blended in depending on individual basis. But that's kind of the idea when you're thinking of exercise selection, is compound movements and isolation movements are based on strength and frequency. Now, also, one thing you want to consider is when we talked about 10 to 20 hard sets per body part, it doesn't mean, like if you think about biceps, that doesn't mean you have to do 10 to 20 hard sets of bicep curls. Most back exercises also stimulate and stress the biceps. So if I'm doing, an underhand grip pull-up, that's a lot of work on my biceps. So that's for my back as well, so it can actually kind of count for both. That's the benefit of compound movements, is you can address working sets for multiple muscles at one time. So heavy chest presses works my chest and my triceps. So one hard set of a chest press can count towards my 10 to 20 hard set total that I need for both chest and triceps. So a lot of my clients will notice we don't do a lot of arm isolation work. We do it, but we definitely probably don't do 10 to 20 hard sets of it per week because their isolation and their arm movements are already being involved in other movements. So when they do back rows, that's already getting their biceps. When they do chest presses, overhead presses, that's already getting their triceps. So we might have a what looks like a low count of pure isolation for arm movements because their arms are already being involved in compound movements for other muscle groups. So that's something to consider. So what I typically look at is, like, depending on the workouts, before I do a big, heavy compound movement, you do want to warm up and kind of prepare the body to move. And that is really good for kind of just movement quality, which helps alleviate joint stress. It helps work on individual movement issues, like corrective exercise aspects. So there's different other movements you have to blend in as well. But that exercise selection per body part is what you want to consider. Do I do compound or isolations based on strength versus frequency, and remembering that compound movements count for all the muscles involved towards that 10 to 20 total working sets per body part goal that you have per week. Now, the last component you want to kind of address and consider within programming is the need for progressive overload. What you do to the body, stress-wise, has to continue to increase a little bit over time. If you do the same exact stress, the body adapts to that and then it stops adapting. So you have to continue to push the body. There has to be some degree of the training feeling harder over time. Now, that can be with exercise selections, that can be with increased, rep count, it can be increased weight. There's a lot of ways to do it. Well, the structure that I like to use the most is 4-week programs. So I pick specific exercises and specific set count and rep ranges for every exercise. And then I have the client do that for 4 weeks. Now, their workouts per week, like per day of the week, are different. So, maybe workout 1 is, chest and triceps, workout 2 is back and biceps, workout 3 is legs, so each going to change per workout. But what they do week 1, those workouts are repeated week 2, week 3, and week 4. Week 1 is just learning the movements. Trying to figure out, okay, what are my right warm-up weights? What are going to be kind of good working set weights? What do I squeeze in this movement? How do I feel in that movement? Where do I balance in this movement? So you're just learning the movements in week 1. You're still going to be within 1 to 2 reps in reserve. You're still going to like a good stress load, but you're still it's new to it. So it's like riding a bike. You're going to wobble everywhere a little bit. Or a baby animal trying to learn how to walk. You're going to wobble. So there's going to be some less technique inefficiency essentially within week 1 no matter what. Week 2, we try to refine our technique and get that more precise. That is going to allow them probably to just increase technique, which is going to create a greater stress load within the targeted muscles. So there's your progressive overload. Or they can add a little bit of weight or add a rep or 2 compared to week 1 because now they feel more comfortable with it. Then weeks 3 and 4, they're really forced to push their limits. How can they, add 5 pounds? How can they add, a kilogram? How can they add a repetition here or there? We just try to push on improving technique. That's the main goal because that continues to refine the stress into the targeted muscles. So every week, if they can improve technique, that's most important. Then if they can add weight or add reps within the listed rep range, that's great as well. But you need to create an improvement or an increase in stress from workout to workout to workout, from week to week to week. You can do that, by, like I said, trying to improve technique, reps, or weight. You can change up, body part splits, frequency of training. However you do it, you just got to do it. So progressive overload, meaning that you need to progress the stimulus that you're causing to the body, the stress to the body, needs to progress over time. So again, I like doing 4 weeks, then you pick new movements and you repeat. Do another 4 weeks, pick new movements, repeat. It makes it very kind of a good, easy structure, but it matches all the needs. And it's realistic that people will be able to make some improvement in technique, weight, or reps within 4 weeks, like over 4 weeks. If you do a program for longer than 4 weeks, you're going to find that you will not be able to make continued improvement every single week unless you sandbag to the hell out of the first week, which you shouldn't do because then you didn't get anything from it. So remember that the very first week still needs to be to good form failure or within 1 or 2 reps of good form failure. If you're stopping multiple reps of good form failure, then that week was a waste of your time. So people who do programs for 8, 10, 12 weeks, I would extremely, extremely caution you to kind of raise awareness and say, how hard are you really trying those first couple weeks? If it's not to good form failure, if it's not a true 1 to 2 reps short of good form failure, then you're wasting time. You're just practicing lifting weights. You're not getting anything from it. Okay? So, if you're wanting to create a program that maximizes muscle growth, all of these elements need to be accounted for. There's a billion ways to set this up for every individual. Just make sure you factor in these elements. So as we said, frequency can be 2 to 3 times a week per muscle group. Sets should be between 10 to 20 hard sets per muscle group. Remember that you can blend multiple muscle groups in a single movement with compound exercises. And remember that compound versus isolation exercise selections are based on strength levels and kind of frequency of training. And then make sure that whatever you're doing, there's progressive overload to it. Cool. Also, make sure you do your nutrition. Again, if you don't eat correctly, you don't get anything for these efforts. So make sure you listen to yesterday's podcast. If you want any help setting up any programs, that is what I do. So reach out and I'll help you set up a program specific to your needs. Or if you're a gym owner or a trainer director and you want to set up templates like this that your trainers can use, reach out as well. I love doing that. One of my favorite things in the world to do because I know if I help one person, I'm helping dozens and dozens, if not hundreds more. So it's very meaningful, and I love doing it. So reach out if you need any help. Our email is brutalirongym@gmail.com. Well, if you like today's podcast or the podcast in general, please consider sharing it. The more people we share the podcast with, the more people we can help, and that's the whole goal. It's the whole point of why we're doing this. Also, thank you to the patrons of the podcast, people who financially support the podcast. The podcast is well over $1,000 a year for hosting costs. I give an hour to it every single day. We're going to keep it for free as long as I can afford to, which I think will be forever. But I do appreciate the donations because they do help cover some of that cost, which I greatly appreciate. Thank you. If you want to donate, you can do so at our website, www.brutalirongym.com. There's an option there for a one-time donation, a monthly donation, yearly donation. Even $5 a month goes a long way. and I appreciate it very much. Also, if you like the information we share on our podcast, you can find more from us on our social media channels on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube under the name Brutal Iron Gym. If you have any questions, feedback, suggestions, anything you want to know, let us know at our email at brutaliron@gmail.com. As always, I hope this was helpful, and thank you for listening.